I'm Eliza Rowan, 38, a financial advisor in Boise, Idaho. And this isn't a love story. I used to think I'd spend the rest of my life alone, not because I hated anyone, but because I got used to taking care of myself. Ever since I was 18, it all started with a small apartment I bought on my own, and a key that, for the next 5 years, no one but me could make a copy of. You're listening to this story on Renvenge Zinnia, where the truths that once got buried are told by those who lived them. And if you've ever felt like me, holding it all together, paying the price, hoping quietly, then maybe you'll understand why I finally chose not to carry it anymore. If anything I say touches a part of you, feel free to hit subscribe. Not because I need another follower, but because you just might find yourself in the next story we tell. I met Wesley Grant when I was 33 at a financial seminar for young families. I wasn't even supposed to be there. I was filling in for a colleague who called in sick. Wesley stood next to me while we were getting coffee. He smiled. I nodded. Nothing remarkable, until he sat at my breakout table and answered every single question I was about to say. He was confident, composed, never rushed, the kind of man who didn't sweep you off your feet, but lingered in your mind. That night, he sent me an email. If you don't mind, I'd love to continue that discussion. Somewhere with more sugar than coffee? I'd grown used to the cold professionalism of our field, but the way Wesley spoke, it made me breathe easier. He didn't judge. He didn't brag. And when I told him that someone once left me for being too rigid, hard to love, he just smiled and said, "So what if you're hard to love? The important thing is you don't hate yourself." Little by little, I softened. We loved like adults do. No fireworks, but with certainty. I made most of the moves. After about a year of dating, I invited him to live with me. His lease was ending, and he said it made sense. I had my own condo, a bright living room, 2 bedrooms, and a small kitchen I designed myself in smoke gray tones. The first time Wesley walked into my place, he said one thing: "This is cleaner than anywhere I've ever lived." I laughed. "So, does that mean you can live here?" He didn't answer. He just wrapped his arms around me from behind, and from that day, we lived together. But there was one small thing. He never asked for a key, and I never asked why. We got married after living together for 1.5 years. No big ceremony. I paid for the marriage license, the home renovations, and a brand new couch because his old one gave him back pain. My mom asked me once, "Did he chip in anything?" I laughed. "It was my choice, Mom." Because I believed when you love someone, you don't keep score. When you want someone to feel at home, you do everything you can to make them stay. What I didn't realize was some people stay only long enough to leave on better terms. Wesley never touched the finances. He always said, "You're better at this than I am. I trust you." And that comforted me, because for the first 4 years, he never gave me a reason to doubt him. He remembered my mother's birthday. He fed the cat when I was away. He wrote handwritten Christmas cards, even though his handwriting was terrible. I thought, maybe love doesn't need fireworks. Maybe it's just about who stays. But then I noticed something. Every time I came home from a business trip, no matter how short, I was always the one who opened the door first. Every time I offered him a spare key, he'd say, "Nah, you're always back before me anyway." He said it for years, and I believed him. I used to think I was Wesley's last stop, but now I know I was just his layover. The one who paid the bills, painted the walls, made the house livable. So someone else could move in without lifting a finger. That key he never wanted to hold, it wasn't forgetfulness, it was clarity. He never saw this place as his final destination. And looking back at the version of me who still believed in an unlocked door, I want to say one thing to that woman, Eliza. If someone doesn't want to hold the key, maybe they never planned to truly step inside. I once believed that stepping through my in-laws' front door meant entering a grateful family. Instead, I walked into a theater where everyone knew their lines. except me, because I was never given a script. The first time I met Wesley's parents was in late spring. Boise was still a little chilly, and I wore a beige long-sleeve dress, modest but elegant. He said, "Don't be nervous, my parents are easygoing." I believed him. The Grants' house was tucked at the end of a street lined with old maple trees, black roof tiles, low-pitched eaves, and a tiny front yard with a mossy green stone statue that had seen better days. It used to feel like money. The door opened, and there she was, Marla Grant. She wasn't as old as I expected, maybe early 60s, tightly permed hair, red lipstick, pearl earrings. She smiled and opened her arms like she was welcoming a long-lost granddaughter home. "Oh my, this is Eliza. She's far too elegant for what's necessary, Wesley." I smiled and nodded. "It's lovely to meet you both." Wesley's father, Terrence, stood up from the couch, his eyes still glued to the financial news on TV. "So, financial advisor, huh? Must be good if you're making money in that blood-sucking industry." Before I could respond, Marla chuckled softly. "Oh, stop it. She's young. She's still contributing to society. Women who succeed in business don't come around often." That kind of line I would hear many times later. There was always a second meaning behind her compliments. We had lunch together. The roast chicken was dry, but I finished my plate. Marla asked a lot about my job, whether I planned to have kids, what my parents did for a living. When I said my mother was a retired nurse, she nodded. Healthcare takes sacrifice. I understand. My family had to make sacrifices too. I wasn't sure what she meant, but Wesley kept smiling the whole time. He didn't step in during the questions. He just quietly refilled my plate now and then, like everything was fine. After lunch, Marla gave me a tour around the house. She pointed to old framed photos, Wesley's graduation, his soccer days, standing in front of his high school. Nothing newer than 10 years ago. She said, "We used to have a small family business. Did well back before the downturn. Then the market shifted. And well, now we just live modestly." I nodded. But I noticed. Every time she said "used to have," her chin tilted just slightly upward, like the past was still holding up their present pride. On the drive home, I asked Wesley, "Were your parents wealthy before?" He just shrugged, "Wealthy enough to still think they are." And I got it. That explained the smell of old wood in the house and the gold-plated frames on generic printed art. His family was the kind that still held their heads high even after they'd already lost the hill. Our wedding was quiet. Both families signed a simple prenup. I suggested it. Wesley didn't own any major assets. I wasn't thinking about division, but my mother said, "It's better to have something in writing." Marla, on the other hand, said this, "Eliza, sweetie, I mean it. If you two ever get ahead someday, maybe help us out a little with this house. It's the only thing we managed to keep after everything." I didn't know if after everything meant the economy or a plan already in motion. After the wedding, Wesley moved into my old condo. Life was stable, even peaceful, but I noticed something. He still never made a copy of the key. Every time I offered, he'd smile and say, "No need." "You always hold the keys." And one time, while his mom was on the phone, I overheard her say, "That girl's all right, knows how to make money, knows how to stay quiet, knows her place." I wasn't sure what her place meant, but I knew. I wasn't the lead in that play. I was just a well-rehearsed extra. Years later, looking back on that very first visit, I realized something. They didn't look up at me because they admired me. They looked up to measure how far I'd have to bend before they'd call me family. That Sunday afternoon, when Wesley said he was taking me to his parents' house just for fun, I had no idea I was walking into a preset chessboard. They served lasagna, same rich tomato sauce, same overly thick cheese layer I'd grown used to whenever we visited. And right in the center of the table, beside the plates, was an old issue of a financial newspaper. It was from over 5 months ago. but the corner was folded up, highlighting an article titled, "Transforming Single-Family Homes into Dual Living Properties, a Cost-Efficient Solution." Marla beamed. "Eliza, don't you think this is a great idea? This house is too big to go underused. If you two lived here someday, it'd be so convenient to help look after us. 2 units. Still private." I didn't get a chance to reply. Wesley placed a hand on my shoulder, looked into my eyes as if the idea had just sparked in that moment. "What if we remodeled the house, split it into 2 separate living spaces, shared entrance, independent units? It's a lot cheaper than buying a new place." I paused. I had thought about future housing options, but living under the same roof as my in-laws, even in separate units, was never part of that vision. Wesley continued, "My parents are getting older. I'm their only child. I can't just leave them alone, but I don't want you stuck in a cramped condo either. This is the best option for everyone." The way he said it, calm, logical, responsible, left me with no reasonable argument. I nodded softly. If it's truly separate units, then okay. He gently squeezed my hand and kissed my forehead. "I knew you'd understand." That evening, he printed out a layout for the renovation and laid it on our dining table. I was peeling fruit while glancing over the design. It looked simple, clean, practical. One side for us, the other for the Grants. I asked, "How much will it cost?" Wesley answered, "About $60,000, but..." He hesitated, set his spoon down. "There's something else." I stopped slicing, looked up at him. He avoided my eyes. "My parents are in debt." I sat down completely. "How much?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened his phone, tapped in some numbers, then turned the screen toward me. $119,800. But we can round that up to $120,000. I blinked, thought I'd read it wrong. "Sorry." "What?" Wesley swallowed. "It's layered debt. Mostly credit cards, some consumer loans. It started as $20,000 to $30,000, then rolled over and over. I didn't even realize it had grown this much. But I knew, because I work in finance, and no debt accidentally balloons to nearly $120,000 unless someone's feeding it." I asked quietly, "How long have you known?" He didn't speak. "Wesley." 2 years. I stood up, walked into the bathroom and shut the door. I didn't cry, I just stared at myself in the mirror. I'm a financial advisor. I read numbers like poetry, but I'd never seen one push me this far back before. When I came out, Wesley was leaning against the window. He spoke without turning around. "I didn't want you to see me as a bad son-in-law, but I can't let my parents go bankrupt." I asked, "So, what do you want?" He turned to face me. "Help me. Pay off their debt. We'll renovate the house. And the title will be under both our names." I smiled, tightly. The kind of smile that draws a paper-thin line. "So, I'm paying?" Wesley replied like reading a budget summary. $120,000 for their debt, plus $60,000 for renovation equals $180,000 total. But no rush. You can pay gradually. I'll contribute some too. I stared at him. "How much will you contribute?" "I haven't worked it out yet. Depends on my salary." And then I nodded, not because I was naive, but because I needed to know if I paid, what would they do next? Wesley hugged me, said that familiar line, "I knew you'd understand." I rested my head on his shoulder, and in my mind I thought about that old newspaper Marla had accidentally left on the table. It was dated 5 months ago, back when I knew nothing, back when they may have already been waiting. Some numbers never show up on an invoice. Some debts don't begin with a signature. And I realized I wasn't being asked for a loan. I was being priced. There's a bitter little joke life likes to tell. If you're the one writing the checks, people often assume you don't need a seat at the table. I started paying down the debt in mid-March. The first $15,000 went directly from my savings account into a bank account Wesley gave me. He said, "Just transfer it here. It's faster. My parents don't really do online banking." I nodded. I didn't press further. But that same day, I opened a separate handwritten ledger. Not for work, but for me. Page 1 read, Payment number 1, $15,000. Note, no one mentioned it. And that was true. Not a single person in Wesley's family acknowledged the money. We moved into the Grant house for the renovation. I lived upstairs. They stayed on the lower floor, just like the blueprint. But the air in that house never felt like something I could call home. Every morning I came down to the kitchen. Marla had already made breakfast, but always 3 servings, for herself, for Terrence, and for Wesley. I had to fetch my own plate, set my own place. And if I came down more than 15 minutes late, breakfast was essentially over. One morning, I came down at 7:10 a.m., just in time to watch Marla scrape the remaining eggs into the trash. I asked gently, "Could I have had that?" She answered without looking at me, "Oh, I thought you already ate upstairs." That night, I told Wesley. He winced, but didn't say much. "She's probably just not used to it yet." I gave a quiet, dry laugh. Not used to living with the person paying $180,000? He squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "Let's not bring up money anymore, okay? We're family." A week later, when I made the second transfer, $10,000, I overheard Terrence calling Wesley into the living room. He said it loud enough that I'd hear, "Tell her to hurry it up. We're overdue on a few things." Her. Not Eliza. Not your wife. Not the woman who just saved this house from foreclosure. Just her. Still, I kept paying, and I kept logging each one in my little notebook. Payment number 3, $8,000. Note, delayed thank you. Payment number 4, $6,000. Note, Wesley said, "Can you send it faster?" Payment number 5, $12,000. Note, right after, mother-in-law bought new designer shoes. I didn't know what I was trying to prove. Maybe to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy, that this was actually happening. I had a small home office upstairs, where I managed client portfolios and investment strategies. I began sleeping on the couch in that office instead of beside Wesley. I told him I was working late. He didn't question it. He just said, "You do whatever you need to. Just try not to look tired in front of everyone." I nodded and realized, in that sentence, everyone didn't include me. The breaking point came one night when they were celebrating a new insurance contract Wesley had landed. I was given the task of delivering the cocktails. I carried the tray down carefully, handed each glass to each person. Marla looked at me, smiled just slightly, and said, clear enough for the room, "See? She's good with money, knows how to cook, carries herself well. Guess it wasn't a waste of my son's time after all." That sentence made me freeze for a few seconds. Not a waste of time? Was I paying off a debt for the privilege of being with her son? That night, I logged. Payment number 6, $9,000. Note, first time I wanted to disappear. And I rested my hand on that sentence for a long while. I didn't cry. I just finally admitted to myself, this wasn't a family. This was a family business. And I was an investor who owned no shares. Some places don't silence you by force. They just never listen when you speak. And when you pay, they don't count. I didn't mean to overhear anything. I simply came home earlier than planned. That day, a meeting was canceled last minute, so I left the office at 4:30 p.m., about an hour earlier than usual. On the way back, I even stopped at the bakery and picked up cheese-filled rolls that Terrence liked. I thought, at the very least, I should stay polite. I opened the door quietly, like I always did. No one heard me come in, and I didn't rush into the house either. I planned to change clothes before heading down to the kitchen, but as I passed the hallway upstairs, I heard Marla's voice rise clearly from the living room downstairs. "You need to speed it up. That girl's not dumb, but she trusts you. Just stretch it a few more months, then it's done." I froze. My heart slowed by a beat. Then I heard Wesley's voice. All right, Mom, but stop calling her that girl. Eliza's still making regular payments. Her. Again. Not Eliza. Not my wife. Just a function. A walking ATM. Then Terrence's voice. Lower now, like a whisper. How much does she have left? Wesley replied, about $40,000. A month and a half more, max, then I'll just tell her. Tell her what? Marla asked. That. I'm moving back in with Vera. I'm divorcing Eliza. I leaned back against the wall, still holding the pastry bag, hands shaking. Vera. That name wasn't unfamiliar. Wesley's former co-worker, the same woman who once borrowed $5,000 from me to help her sick mom and then vanished without paying a cent. And now, she would be moving into the house I was paying to rebuild? Marla's voice continued, casual as if reading from a shopping list. Vera may not make much money, but she knows how to keep a man happy. I like her better, and I know you do too. Mom, don't say that. Eliza hasn't done anything wrong. Who said she did? But people with money tend to think they have rights. I don't like that look in her eye. I bit down on my lip, hard. I tasted blood, not from pain, but because I felt something inside me crack. A line of belief, a rhythm of tolerance, snapping. I took a quiet step back, then deliberately made a loud sound as I closed the front door again, and I called out, I'm home! From the living room, I heard chairs scraping, a flurry of footsteps. Wesley came out to greet me, his smile flawless. You're back early. Everything okay? I held up the pastry bag. Stopped by the bakery. Got the kind you like. We had dinner together. Everyone was there. The food was warm. The words were gentle. No one mentioned the debt. No one mentioned Vera. Only I sat there, at that table, like an actress who had already read the full script but still had to perform the scene where she didn't know. That night, after Wesley went in to shower, I stayed in my office. I opened my notebook and wrote, Payment number 9, $6,500. Note, I know everything. Still paying, to see the end clearly. I didn't run. I didn't scream. I started watching. I reprinted every transfer receipt. I downloaded the home renovation contract copies. I contacted a retired attorney who used to work with my mother, and I began to redraw the blueprint of this house, not to live in it, but to bleed it dry. Some say betrayal is just an accident. Number betrayal is when people still invite you to the table, even though they've already set a place for someone else. There was a tall glass vase in the Grant family's kitchen. It sat on a corner shelf near the window. Inside it were always the same artificial flowers. 4 pale yellow roses, bright green plastic leaves, and a thin layer of dust that told stories of years past. One morning, after washing some cups, I accidentally brushed it with my elbow. It fell. It didn't shatter completely, just cracked down the middle, a diagonal line from the neck to the base. It looked like someone had sliced into skin that had already healed. Marla walked in, sighed, and said, I bought that vase in 1988. Just leave it. I'll clean it up later. I picked it up, blood trailing down my hand from a small cut. But I smiled. It's all right. I'm used to picking up broken pieces. That night, I started picking up other pieces, not with my hands, but with paperwork. I went through every transfer confirmation email. I printed each construction invoice. I called the lead renovation contractor and asked for a copy of our agreement. Then I asked him to draft an addendum stating all renovation costs for the property located at 1423 East Ridge Lane were paid in full by Eliza Rowan. He hesitated, then asked, Why do you need that clarified in writing? I replied, To avoid confusion. My husband seems to have forgotten who's actually footing the bill. The next day, I met with my private attorney, Ellen Price, an old friend of my mother's. I handed her everything. Total amount transferred, $114,300. Detailed breakdown of each payment renovation contracts. Full property tax history, which showed the house was under Terrence Grant's name. Ellen nodded slowly and asked, What do you want to do? I answered without hesitation. I want the house title transferred into my name, based on financial contribution. It wasn't difficult. The house was under a mortgage and required refinancing to continue the renovations. I was the only one who could show financial solvency. 3 weeks later, the title was updated. The property now legally belonged to Eliza Rowan, sole owner. I didn't tell Wesley. I let him go on thinking I was still sacrificing for the family. I still got up early, went to work, and made the 10th payment transfer as scheduled. But I was no longer the woman enduring everything. I was the one closing boxes on a chessboard. One evening, Wesley brought it up softly. I think we can wrap up the renovations next month. Vera's looking for jobs nearby. Maybe she could... I cut him off. I think I'll be the one deciding who lives in this house. He chuckled, thinking I was joking. You're always like this, hot and cold. I looked him in the eye. And you're always the same, cold, just unwilling to admit it. After he left the room, I took out my expense notebook and taped a new page in the back. Total, $126,800. This page is a reminder. Paying is one thing. Knowing who you're paying for is another. I started changing the locks on the front door. I told everyone the old one was getting loose. I labeled the new keys and issued exactly 3. 1 for me, 1 backup in the safe, 1 handed to my lawyer. Wesley noticed and asked, "Why'd you change the locks without telling me?" I replied, "Whoever owns the house gets to decide that." He frowned. "What are you talking about?" I smiled. "Just kidding. What, are you nervous?" Some people try to glue broken vases back together. I don't. I learn how to turn the cracks into cutting edges, so no one can try to hold me without bleeding. There's a saying I once heard, women don't take revenge with knives, they take it with time. And I had used that time to set the table for a day like this one. Wesley walked into my home office around 8 p.m. The soft yellow desk lamp lit up his face. The same face I once mistook for peace. He scratched his chin, then asked, "Are you still working?" I nodded. "Just finished." I closed my laptop and placed a small folder on the desk in front of me. Thin, clean, clipped inside a clear plastic sleeve. He glanced at it. "What's this?" I said quietly. "Confirmation. Full repayment." He picked it up, flipped through the pages, bank statements, a breakdown of every payment. The total, $180,000. 12 transactions with exact timestamps, each one matched to the receiving account. Even screenshots of the destination account, the one where all the debt had been funneled. Wesley said nothing for a long moment. He sat across from me and let out a slow breath, then smiled. "Wow, you really surprised me. I thought it'd take until the end of next quarter." I leaned back, arms folded. I figured dragging it out was messy. I had a little left in my account, so I finished it off. He nodded, rubbing his face with one hand. A gesture I'd seen before, whenever he was about to lie. He shivered slightly, like he was moved. "Thank you. My parents will be so happy." I stared at him. "Just your parents?" He paused for a beat, then quickly added, "And me too. I know you've sacrificed so much for my family." I handed him another folder. A printed statement from a secondary bank account. It showed $90,000 withdrawn that same day. It was a decoy account. I'd created it just to leave a trail. But the money hadn't gone anywhere. It still sat safely in my main account, ready to be used as leverage, if needed. Wesley stood, stepped into the hallway, then returned. "Eliza." I looked up. "Yes?" His voice dropped to a near whisper. "I think we should talk." I tilted my head. "About?" He hesitated, then bit his lip. "I don't think I fit this life anymore. I'm sorry, there's someone else, and I want to move back in, with her. Would you be willing to go stay at your mom's for a while?" I studied him, like a client with high risk on a bad investment. Then I asked, Where do you want to live? Right here, upstairs. You know it's fully renovated now. There's enough room. I smiled, not because I was shocked, but because I finally heard it from him. No more overhearing, no more pretending. I said, "So you waited until I finished paying before bringing this up?" He flinched, but tried to keep it cool. "It's not what you think." I cut him off. "It's fine. I get it. The house is done. The debt is gone. The new girl is ready. You're just moving on to the next phase." He stepped closer. "You don't have to be angry. This can still end peacefully if you just step back quietly." I stood, looked him dead in the eye. "If?" He nodded. "I'll support you financially if needed. I know you've contributed a lot." I walked to the office door, unlatched the deadbolt, and said softly, "I don't need support. I just need you to stop touching things that no longer belong to you." I used to think love meant sharing everything. Now I know love is not about covering someone else's bills. It's not about stepping aside so someone else can move in. And him, he didn't know that this repayment confirmation tonight was just dress rehearsal. The real show? That was still waiting for the audience to take their seats. 3 days after Wesley's gentle conversation, I got a text. "Vera will be arriving Saturday. I'd like you to move out by Friday night to avoid awkwardness." No apology, no negotiation, not even a fake attempt at sadness, just a message, as if I were a tenant whose lease had ended. That Friday night, I cooked one last dinner, not for closure, but to complete my final act, on my terms. Everyone was seated. Wesley, his parents, and me. I served Mr. Terrence's favorite stew, placed it neatly in front of him, then calmly invited everyone to eat. After the main course, I stood up and said, "Before Vera moves in, there are a few things I'd like to clarify." Marla paused, mid-spoon. Wesley glanced at me, eyes narrowing slightly. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a thick stack of papers, and laid them on the table. These are the official documents of property ownership, transferred to my name, notarized, registered with the city. No one spoke. I continued, every word colder than the last. I am the legal owner of this home. I decide who stays and who leaves. Marla let out a nervous laugh first. "Eliza, darling, you're kidding, right? Wesley grew up here. You can't possibly—" I cut her off, still perfectly composed. "I'm not kidding. Every payment from debt coverage to home renovations was made by me. In my name, from my account, all verifiable. Wesley didn't contribute a cent." Terrence's face turned red. "So what? You still live here, don't you?" I nodded. "And as of tonight, the three of you no longer will." Wesley slammed his hand on the table. "You ungrateful witch. I gave you everything. Love, family, opportunity." I smiled. "You gave me nothing but bills and a woman waiting behind the door." He stepped toward me, voice low and threatening. "I'll sue you." This house is marital property. I calmly pulled out one last paper. This is a prenup agreement, drafted at my mother's insistence, signed by you in 2019. It clearly states that any asset acquired solely in my name remains mine, unless co-invested, which you never did. Silence thickened the air. I stepped toward the front door, unlocked it gently, and said, "I've already changed the locks. Local police have been notified in case of any unlawful occupancy. Vera won't be moving in, because this house no longer has spare rooms for homewreckers." Marla's voice cracked. "You'd really kick your in-laws out of the house?" I looked her in the eye. I used to be a daughter-in-law, but when this family chose Vera, I became a homeowner, and homeowners have the right to remove guests who violate their space. Wesley erupted. "This is all your fault. If you hadn't faked love, maybe I cut him off. "Maybe what? Chosen differently? You always had a choice, Wesley, and now I do too. I choose not to keep feeding people who see me as a walking credit card." The final twist. I reached into my bag and pulled out an envelope. And by the way, that last $60,000 payment, I never made it. Wesley's eyes went wide. You lied. Number Y staged. That entire folder of receipts, it was a dress rehearsal. As for that remaining debt, I've officially notified the bank that the heir responsible is you, Wesley Grant. I was merely offering temporary support. The same door that once opened for a husband, now shut, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. I don't need to hold on to those who already walked out. This house is finally a home. Because for the first time, it holds no one waiting for someone else to pay the price. I used to believe you can't reclaim time once it's gone. But after spending 3 years paying off debt for a family that never said thank you, I began reclaiming every minute with black ink, white paper, and the law. The morning after I kicked Wesley out of the house, I walked into Attorney Ellen Price's office. I laid a folder on her desk. She looked at me and asked, "Are you ready?" I nodded. Let's begin. Step 1. Divorce filing. Unilateral. No mediation. Grounds: infidelity, financial exploitation, extramarital affair. Attached evidence: bank records of all 12 payments. Home renovation contracts, an audio recording from the night I came home early, where Wesley clearly says, once she finishes paying, I'll ask her to leave so Vera can move in. Step 2. A civil lawsuit demanding reimbursement of the payments I made for his parents' debts, $126,800. Basis: no written gift agreement. Evidence includes a written note from me, clearly stating temporary financial assistance only. Terrence Grant's signed statement acknowledging that I was covering the balance temporarily. A legal admission that it was a debt, not a gift. Step 3, lawsuit against Vera Lynn for intentional interference in a legal marriage. Evidence: a text message from Vera to Wesley. I hate waiting. You said your wife was almost done paying it off. An old email from Vera requesting to borrow $5,000 from me, never repaid, showing a pattern of manipulation and calculated behavior. Total amount claimed across all 3 suits. Wesley Grant, $180,000. Asset misuse, legal fees, reputational damages. Terrence and Marla Grant, $126,800. Debt, late penalties, 1-year interest. Vera Lynn, $75,000. Marital interference, emotional distress, unpaid loan. I didn't expect them to pay it all. I just wanted everything they once labeled as shared to be officially marked as owed. 3 weeks later, Ellen's office called. Wesley wanted to negotiate. I declined. I didn't need apologies. I needed a precedent, strong enough to be remembered. A week after that, I heard through legal channels. Marla had sold her heirloom wedding ring to cover her legal retainer. Terrence sold his last shares in a local trucking company for just a quarter of their value. As for Vera, her new boyfriend dumped her after finding out she was facing a civil lawsuit. She called me from an unknown number. I answered but said nothing. Her voice came through, breath shaking. "Would you consider dropping the suit?" I made a mistake. I replied, "No, I won't drop it. Because you didn't just take my husband, you stole 3 years I could have spent living in peace." That night, I opened my financial journal again. I added a new page. But this time, there were no dollar signs. Just 3 lines. Value of someone who once believed, $0. Value of waking up at the right time. Priceless value of the lesson, still accumulating. I closed the notebook, and for the first time in months, I slept without locking my bedroom door. Some debts never make it into contracts, but when they're due, they come calling, layer by layer, like trust being torn apart, slowly, deliberately. And me, I never needed them to repay everything. I just needed them to never forget. Who stood up for them when their entire family was about to collapse. I used to live as the one who covered for others, covered for responsibilities, covered for expectations, covered for other people's greed, disguised as family ties. Now I live differently. I still wake up early, still eat breakfast alone. But there's one thing that's changed. I no longer wait for someone to open their eyes and decide whether I'm allowed to stay that day. This house, once the crime scene of betrayal, I didn't tear it down. I renovated it one final time into 2 small studios and a mini financial counseling office. That's where I started a program called Don't Pay for Them, Learn How to Pay Right. It's a free service for women who've been financially exploited after marriage. Each week I meet with 2 or 3 women. They bring bills, bank statements, apology letters from ex-husbands. I don't advise them to divorce. I just point to each line item and ask, was this money you spent because you trusted or because you were afraid? One woman, Teresa, age 41, sat and cried for half an hour after I asked that. She said, I kept thinking if I covered everything, they would stay. I answered slowly, they don't stay because you pay. They only stay until you can't pay anymore. I also started writing, a blog, no real name attached. I only signed it, E. The first post was titled, I no longer want to be the one at the end of the line carrying the weight. The second, true value isn't in the receipt, it's in who pays their own share. A week later, I got an email invitation from a major podcast in Seattle. I declined to be on video. I agreed to speak only if my voice could remain anonymous. They said yes. My voice aired on episode 213, titled, The Silent Cost of Being the Strong One. 48 minutes, no edits, no music, just me, and the story of someone who once believed love meant paying for everything, but now only wants to pay what's hers. One afternoon, I got a handwritten letter, not from Wesley, not from Vera. It was from the mother of a young woman who had come to one of my sessions, just 26 years old. In the letter, she wrote, my daughter told me, Mom, I won't become a depressed 40-year-old just because I love the wrong person. I just met someone, a woman, who told me, no one is worth paying for to the point where you have nothing left. I don't know who you are, but thank you for changing the course of my daughter's life. I hope you live the rest of yours without anyone behind you pushing you into debt. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, didn't label it important, because now everything I keep is something I choose to keep. No pressure, no hint, no trap. I once thought freedom meant not getting kicked out. Now I understand. True freedom is choosing where you stay and who you stay for. I have a notebook. It's not fancy. Faux leather cover, edges frayed, the first page still stained with tears I didn't have time to wipe when I started writing. At first, I used it to track every debt I paid on someone else's behalf. Every line, every number, every invisible bruise. Today, I turn to the last page. No more debts, no more people I need to carry. Just one sentence, written in steady, deliberate ink. From today on, no one else gets written in this ledger. I place the notebook in the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet, where I keep closed contracts. I lock the drawer. Not out of fear it might be stolen, but to remind myself, some chapters don't need to be ripped out. They just need to be closed. I stepped out onto the second-floor balcony, the place where I used to wait for Wesley to come home each night. The June breeze was soft. No scent of cologne, no sound of shoes, no promises, just wind. I stood there with no thoughts, no pain, no regret, no hope that someone might ring the doorbell. Then I walked back inside and turned on the kitchen light, cooked a meal for one, set the table for one, ate slowly, bite by bite. There was no one to ask, what do you feel like eating? No one I needed to save the best piece for. But what about you? If you've ever carried someone else's burden through money, time, or the best years of your life, leave a comment below, not to complain, but to remind each other. The person who knows when to stop is also the person who's finally ready to start living. And if this story touched something inside you, consider subscribing to this channel. There are more stories to come about people who once seemed silent, but turned out to be the ones who closed the doors and lit the way forward. I don't blame myself for loving the wrong person. I only regret that I once believed if I just tried a little harder, they'd be grateful. But the biggest lesson I've learned is this: not everyone is capable of learning to appreciate, and you are not obligated to be the teacher for someone who refuses to learn. Don't ever think, it's just this one time, I'll cover for them. Because that one time might be the open door for a lifetime of silent debt. Learn to say no, early, clearly, and firmly, not out of selfishness, but because you deserve a life where no one else's name gets written in your ledger again.